Welcome back to the TruGolf Academy. You've joined me, Jon Watts, today at Branston Golf and Country Club. Today's video is all going to be about adding distance to your drives. So I'm going to give you 3 top tips to add distance to your tee shots. Stay tuned to find out more. As mentioned, today's video is all going to be about adding distance to your drives. So I'm going to give you 3 reasons, 3 big tips that I think are going to help you increase those yards where you really need to push that tee shot out there a little bit further. So we're focusing here on the driver, but of course you could move this into the fairway and things, but this is really concentrating on the longest shot that you're going to play from the tee when you need to find those extra few yards to perhaps give yourself the chance of getting up there on that par 5 or close on that par 4, whatever it might be. So tip number 1 is going to be about striking up on the ball. And I might have talked about all these points individually, but I'm just going to talk through them, as I said, in one video and give you 3 big reasons to add distance to your tee shots. So striking up on the ball is definitely a key point. And if we can hit up on the ball, we will add distance to the drive. But we actually ultimately want to hit up on the ball without adding too much loft to the driver. And I have talked about this, and I will put the link in this video as well, talking about spin loft. So I won't get into it too much today, but the difference between the angle of attack and the dynamic loft on the golf club. So ultimately we want to be striking up on the ball, but we don't want to be tilting that club back, adding a lot of loft, which we might also do if the club face was a long way open. So for me as a right-hander, that's leaking it too far out to the right of the target. Now, how do we help develop an upward angle of attack? Well, there's a couple of things that set up. It's ensuring the ball position is just inside your lead heel. So for me as a right-hander, just inside my left heel. And I want to try and tilt my upper body away from the target. Now, what I see most people do wrongly when they do that is try and change their hips. So try and push their hips forwards to tilt with their upper body. You don't need to change your hips. I want them very well centered between your heels, but I want you to tilt with your upper body slightly behind the golf ball. So your trail shoulder is lower than your lead shoulder, and that means my sternum is actually behind the golf ball, and that is going to help me strike up on the golf ball. I've got to make sure that I'm not striking up and adding a lot of loft by also leaning backwards. So we want to be setting ourselves at setup, but ensuring that we do go through the ball, that we're not tilting back, opening that club face or adding a lot of loft. Point number 2 that's going to help you, and in a minute I'm going to hit some and try and add these 3 things together. You may just try one at a time and see what happens for you on the driving range. So point number 2 is going to be about creating a bigger backswing. So that is a bigger shoulder turn on the backswing to help you load a little bit more pressure into this trail foot. So what we're trying to create is a bigger shoulder turn. So if our max is normally 80 degrees, let's try and create 90. If it's normally 90, let's try and create 100. I've heard before that Rory's figures are about 105 degrees of shoulder turn with 45 hip turn. So we have to allow these hips to turn. This trail knee is definitely going to be losing some flex, so don't worry about that if you're going to be creating a bigger turn away from the target. So we want to create a bigger shoulder turn and make sure we're really loading into this trail side here. So what we're going to try and feel with our upper body is that we're actually creating a little bit of upward extension here in our backswing to help us create a bigger turn. But you will see as I do that, my hips are also turning and my trail knee is losing some flex. It's losing flex, but I still definitely feel the pressure loaded into my trail foot. So what we don't want to see is an extension here of the chest, but my pressure too much onto my lead foot. So we want to see an extension of the chest, a real big shoulder turn, but I can feel that pressure onto my trail foot, which is also going to help point number 1. It's going to help me strike more up on the ball. So if I load more into my trail side, it's much easier to move that pressure then from my trail foot to my lead leg and help me strike up on the golf ball. So we're going to be trying to make a bigger turn here. a bigger turn away from the target, they will feel there's a little bit of height gain. Remember, this isn't necessarily about how do we hit most fairways, this is about hitting longer tee shots. So when we really need to open our shoulders and hit a longer one, we want more extension of the chest. If I had no extension with my chest, my sternum would stay pointed down here, and you could see I would create very little turn or coil on the backswing. So there has to be some extension. We want to feel as much as we can in the backswing, even if that means a little height gain for this longer tee shot, as long as I'm loading the pressure into that trail foot. So point number one was making sure we're in the right setup position with the ball position and our sternum location to strike upwards on the golf ball. Point number two is about creating a bigger turn of our thoracic spine, so creating a bigger rotation here, even if that does mean there's a little bit of height gain. And point number three is actually going to be about using the ground better. So I see so many golfers as they start their downswing, their lead leg their trail heel, I should say, start to come up way too early, and there's this real extension movement as if they're almost pushing off the ground, but they're pushing from here. So what we actually want to feel is that there's a little bit of a downward pressure before there's an upward movement. What we see with real long hitters is this lead leg starting to snap back as that leg starts to extend and straighten. But we don't want to be doing that from here. So we want to create some practice swings where we actually feel like there's some downward force into the ground before there's some upward force with this lead leg straightening, extending. I'm not suggesting you take all three of these to the course straight away. I'm just giving you ideas that you could take to the driving range to generate more club head speed. As long as that creates ball speed and distance, do it. You may use one of these, two of these, all three of them, but you'll have practiced them first. Again, it's not about this video hitting more fairways, it's creating more speed. So we want to use the ground better to generate that speed. There is this pushing upward movement, but we cannot do that from here. We've got to be pushing a little bit down into the ground first. So point number one was making sure we're striking up on the ball without adding too much dynamic loft. We will be adding some, but we don't want to be leaning back, opening that face. So we're doing that at setup, ball position, and tilting my upper body behind the golf ball. Point number two was about creating a bigger turn on the backswing here, feeling like our chest extends a little bit to really load into our trail foot. And point number three is about using the ground better to help actually push off the ground. So there's a downward force before an upward. I'm going to go ahead and try and hit one now that I've done those practice drills. So I've moved that ball forwards, I've tilted my sternum behind the golf ball. I'm going to try and make a bigger turn, you can see behind the golf ball, and use the ground on the way through. Let me give it a whirl. I'm very happy with that. I felt like I created a bigger shoulder turn here behind the golf ball, felt like I loaded some pressure into my trail foot, and I felt like I was almost jumping into impact there, which means I'm creating some downward force. I definitely don't use my legs, my lower body, enough in my normal golf swings. So this is a good drill for me. Let me hit one more. Tilt behind the ball, big shoulder turn here behind the golf ball. Load that pressure into my trail foot and then use the ground. Oh, I'm really happy with both of those. That's straight down the target line. Loads of speed, loads of power in there. Looked a really good ball flight. Looked like I was getting that high launch, that low spin, which means I'm starting to strike up on the ball without adding too much loft. So I know those three key points are going to help you generate more speed. I would suggest trying them on the driving range. If you've got a way of measuring clubhead speed and seeing the gain, that would be the ideal. I'm not suggesting you take them to the course straight away. If you have enjoyed the content in this video, if any of these three tips have helped you, please give us a thumbs up and do subscribe to the channel as well. It's the best way to show your support for the TruGolf Academy and never miss a video again. Thanks guys, we'll see you soon.